If you ever thought your high school exams were tough, try taking a quantum physics test while a Zelaxian's brainwaves are accidentally broadcasting their anxiety directly into your temporal lobe. Welcome to just another delightful day at the Galactic Academy of Sciences, where being the only human student is about as comfortable as trying to teach a Venusian slug interpretive dance. Liam Chen sat in his designated pod, trying very hard not to make eye contact with Zrilks, whose 12 eyes were all blinking in different patterns of stress. The examination hall stretched out before him like some architect's fever dream of what the future should look like. All chrome surfaces and holographic interfaces with separate environmental chambers for each species. Because apparently, some students needed to be submerged in acid to think properly. Talk about performance anxiety. To his left, a Martian crystalline entity named Kazit was vibrating at what Liam assumed was their version of a nervous frequency. To his right, the gelatinous mass that was Blob, yes, that was actually their name, and no one had the correct number of tongues to pronounce their real name, was slowly oozing up and down their containment cylinder in a hypnotic pattern. Professor Zixel's tentacles waved in what the faculty handbook assured everyone was a reassuring manner, though to Liam it looked more like a cosmic squid having a seizure. Students, your quantum mechanics examination will commence in precisely 3 microcycles. Remember, this test is adaptive to your species' cognitive processes. No pressure, but your results will be compared to every other sentient being in the galaxy. Liam adjusted his environment suit for the 100th time. The Academy had tried their best to accommodate human needs, but their idea of comfortable room temperature seemed to have been sourced from a faulty database that confused humans with volcanic bacteria. And remember, Professor Zixel's voice modulator chirped, the anti-cheating fields will prevent any form of unauthorized communication or neural enhancement. This includes telepathy, quantum entanglement, and yes, Mr. Rizik, even your species' ability to fold space-time. We had enough trouble with that last semester. The examination pods hummed to life around them, each one customized for its occupant's unique biology. Liam's pod, labeled Basic Carbon-Based Lifeform, came equipped with what someone clearly thought was a state-of-the-art breathing apparatus. In reality, it made him sound like Darth Vader with a head cold. As the final countdown began, Liam could feel the collective anxiety of 20 different species pressing against the psychic dampeners. Somewhere in the back, a Jovian gas-based student was literally evaporating from stress, their tutor hastily trying to recondense them before the exam started. The holographic display flickered to life before him, and Liam took a deep breath through his asthmatic Sith Lord apparatus. Time to show these aliens that humans could do more than just survive on their weird planet with one sun and no psychic predators. Though right now, as the first question materialized in front of him, he was seriously reconsidering his life choices that led to this moment. It started with a sound that shouldn't exist in a supposedly soundproof examination room, a deep, resonating groan that reminded Liam of that time he'd tried to microwave a metal fork in the Academy's kitchen. In his defense, the microwave had been labeled Quantum Heat Redistributor. The lights flickered, which wouldn't have been so bad if half the students in the room didn't generate their own bioluminescence. The effect was like being trapped in a disco hosted by panicking jellyfish. Professor Zixel's tentacles went from their standard purple to an alarming shade of what Liam could only describe as, oh shit, green. Remain calm, students, the professor's voice modulator crackled. The security systems appear to be experiencing a minor, technical adjustment. The last word coincided perfectly with every door in the examination hall slamming shut, with the kind of finality usually reserved for tomb raiders in ancient pyramid movies. Zrilks's 12 eyes all focused on different emergency exits at once, which Liam imagined must give them one hell of a headache. Professor, my environmental readings indicate that the atmospheric regulators are experiencing quantum flux destabilization. In basic carbon-based speak, Liam muttered to himself, we're screwed. The examination hall's AI chose that moment to be helpful. Attention, security protocols have detected a Class 7 anomaly. All systems entering lockdown. Estimated time until environmental system failure, 47 microcycles. Blob's translator spat out a series of sounds that the language filter struggled to process. Calculating for those still using primitive time measurements, the AI added with what Liam swore was a hint of condescension. That's approximately 1 Earth hour. The reaction was immediate and multilingual. Kurzit's crystalline structure began emitting a high-pitched resonance that made Liam's teeth itch. The Jovian student in the back had fully evaporated into a panic cloud, their tutor now desperately trying to contain them in what looked like a fancy thermos. The quantum shielding is preventing any external communication, Professor Zixel announced, their tentacles now typing on 3 different emergency consoles at once, and the override codes appear to be not responding. Can't we just, break down the doors, Liam suggested, immediately regretting opening his mouth as 20 pairs or more of various sensory organs turned to stare at him. Typical primitive solution, huffed Rizzucht, their space-folding appendages twitching in irritation. These doors are designed to withstand the force of a small supernova. They're made of quantum-locked neutronium alloy. So, that's a no on the breaking down part? The environmental systems chose that moment to demonstrate exactly how badly things were going. Liam's pod temperature suddenly spiked to what felt like the surface of Mercury, while next to him, Blob's containment cylinder started freezing over. Across the room, a Pyraxian fire breather's flame went out completely, leaving them looking like a very confused and scaly puppy. Professor Zixel's color had progressed to what Liam could only assume was the "we're all going to die" end of the spectrum. "Students, I need you to remain calm while I... They trailed off, all tentacles drooping in defeat. "While I think of something." The AI chimed in again, somehow managing to sound both cheerful and ominous. "Reminder, environmental system failure will result in immediate exposure to non-compatible atmospheres for 87% of current occupants. Have a nice day." Liam looked around the room at his panicking classmates. The Zylaxians' anxiety broadcasts were now strong enough to pierce the failing psychic dampeners, filling his head with images of their entire species' evolutionary history flashing before their eyes. The Martian crystalline entity had started stress-growing new geometric patterns, and Blob had frozen into what looked like the world's most confused popsicle. As the temperature in his pod swung wildly between surface of the sun and Arctic midwinter, Liam couldn't help but think that this was definitely not covered in the exchange student orientation packet. Somewhere between "don't drink the water in the quantum physics lab" and "avoid eye contact with telepathic plants," they really should have mentioned something about exam rooms turning into death traps. The thing about being trapped in a room with the galaxy's brightest students is that everyone thinks they're the one who's going to save the day. Liam watched as his classmates launched into what he could only describe as a competitive problem-solving Olympics, if the Olympics were run by overachieving space nerds with reality-bending powers. Risk took the first crack at it, their space-folding appendages rippling with concentrated energy. "Obviously, we simply need to create a localized quantum tunnel through the security field." They stretched their appendages, looking remarkably like a cosmic pretzel trying to do yoga. A shimmer appeared in the air, followed by a pop, and the smell of burnt mathematics. Rizzucht deflated slightly. "The quantum shielding appears to be unusually robust." "Amateur," Exrilk scoffed, all 12 eyes rolling in perfectly synchronized disdain. "This clearly calls for a telepathic override of the security mainframe." They pressed all 4 hands to their temples, their antennae glowing with psychic energy. The room's lights flickered briefly, and for a moment, everyone's thoughts were broadcast as elevator music. Then the psychic dampeners kicked in with extra force, leaving Xrilx with what appeared to be the alien equivalent of a migraine. "The firewalls are surprisingly thorough." The Jovian student, finally recondensed into their semi-gaseous form, raised what might have been a hand. "Perhaps a phase shift approach? My species has extensive experience in existing in multiple states simultaneously." They began to vibrate at increasing frequencies, their form blurring at the edges. The result was less quantum breakthrough and more enthusiastic fog machine at a budget disco. They re-solidified with the embarrassed whoosh. "The quantum containment appears to be particularly stringent." Kurzit's crystalline structure pulsed with determination. "My cellular matrix can resonate with most known materials. I shall simply harmonize with the door's atomic structure and convince it to let us through." They pressed against the nearest exit and began to hum. The sound started low, built to a crescendo, and ended with a note that made everyone's fillings hurt, or whatever passed for fillings in their respective species. Kurzit pulled back, looking slightly chipped. "The molecular bonds are unexpectedly stubborn." "Oh, move aside, primitives," huffed a quantum shade from the back of the room. Their shadowy form rippled with multidimensional confidence. "I can simply shift our consciousnesses to a parallel reality where the doors are open." They expanded into a swirling vortex of darkness, which would have been more impressive if it hadn't immediately bounced off the quantum shielding and snapped back like a rubber band, leaving them looking like a very dizzy shadow puppet. Even Blob gave it a shot, extending pseudopods covered in what looked like biological USB ports. "My species evolved to interface with any known technology," their translator chirped optimistically. 5 minutes later, Blob had frozen again, this time in a shape that looked remarkably like the spinning wheel of death on ancient Earth computers. Professor Zixal's tentacles were now tied in what appeared to be actual knots. "Perhaps a combined approach," they suggested weakly, their color shifting through shades of anxiety previously unknown to optical science. What followed was the most sophisticated display of failure Liam had ever witnessed. The Paraxian tried to melt through the floor while the quantum shade attempted to fold space. Xrilks linked minds with Kazut to create some sort of psychic crystalline resonance wave. The Jovian student attempted to quantum tunnel through Blob's interface connection. The result was a spectacular light show that accomplished absolutely nothing, except maybe giving the room's AI a good laugh. "Well," drawled a mechanoid student, their optical sensors focusing on Liam with what could only be described as artificial condescension. "I suppose we could ask the human if they have any ideas. Perhaps they'd like to try hitting things with a stick. I understand that's a traditional Earth problem-solving method." The comment drew a wave of nervous laughter from the room. Even Professor Zixal's tentacles twitched in what might have been amusement. "Indeed," Zrilks added, their dozen eyes blinking in a pattern that somehow managed to convey both superiority and pity. "Humans are quite resourceful with their primitive approaches. Remember when Liam tried to fix the quantum calculator by turning it off and on again?" "That actually worked," Liam pointed out. "Yes, but it's hardly the sort of solution we need right now," the mechanoid responded. "This requires advanced computational processes, sophisticated energy manipulation, and an understanding of 11-dimensional quantum mechanics. No offense, but your species still thinks faster than light travel is impressive." Liam sat back in his increasingly uncomfortable pod, watching as his classmates returned to their increasingly desperate attempts to science their way out of the situation. The quantum shade was now trying to merge with the Jovian student to create some sort of gas-shadow hybrid, which looked about as successful as it sounded. Blob had unfrozen just enough to form what looked like a question mark, and Kazut was stress-growing, so many new crystal formations they were starting to look like a disco ball. The room's helpful AI chose that moment to remind everyone of their impending doom. "Environmental systems at 43% capacity and declining. Thank you for your patience during this extinction-level event." While his classmates continued their increasingly desperate attempts to bend reality, Liam had been doing something that humans were surprisingly good at: observing and thinking about completely stupid ideas that just might work. "Hey," he called out, interrupting what appeared to be the quantum shade's attempt to merge with the room's wiring system. "Has anyone noticed that the environmental controls are actually running on a separate system from the security lockdown?" The mechanoid's optical sensors whirred in what was probably meant to be a patronizing focus. "Of course they are. It's a basic safety protocol. The environmental systems are quantum isolated to prevent—" They suddenly stopped, all their lights blinking rapidly. "To prevent exactly this kind of failure," Liam suggested, climbing out of his pod, despite its protests about optimal containment, "which means they have their own power supply, their own controls, and probably their own maintenance access." Professor Zixal's tentacles uncurled slightly. "While that's technically correct, the maintenance systems are microscopic. They're designed for nanobots, not a clumsy human." Liam grinned, already pulling off the casing of his pod's environmental control unit. "Good thing I'm not planning to use them the way they're designed to be used." Xrilks floated closer, all 12 eyes narrowed in confusion. "What exactly are you planning to do with those components?" "They're quantum-locked and coded to specific nanometric frequencies." "Yeah, but they're still just machines, and you know what humans are really good at? Breaking machines in very specific ways." Liam was now elbow-deep in his pod's guts, pulling out what looked like a tangle of glowing wires, but was probably something much more sophisticated that he was absolutely going to use wrong. The Jovian student wafted closer, curiosity temporarily overwhelming their gaseous panic. But those are femtoscale quantum processors. You can't possibly manipulate them without proper atomic restructuring tools. Watch me, Liam muttered, now using his student ID card as an impromptu screwdriver. Hey, Blob, your species can interface with any technology, right? Could you maybe connect with this thing without actually trying to control it, just like be a fancy organic USB cable? Blob's translator took a moment to process this request. That would be an extremely inefficient use of my capabilities. Perfect. That's exactly what we need right now. Liam had created what looked like a rat's nest of quantum wiring, crystalline power cells, and bits of his pod's interface panel. And Kazut, you said you can resonate with any material, right, even if you can't control it? The crystalline entity vibrated uncertainly. Yes, but as we observed, the quantum shielding is too strong to break through, yeah, but we don't need to break it. We just need to annoy it a little bit. Liam held up his contraption, which was now humming in a way that made everyone's sensory organs uncomfortable. Think of it like giving the quantum shield a small case of hiccups. The mechanoid's criticism protocols were clearly working overtime. This is absolutely absurd. You can't possibly expect to override sophisticated quantum security with whatever that abomination of engineering is. Override it? Nah. Liam was now connecting his creation to Blob's reluctantly extended interface pseudopods. We're just going to make it really confused. Xrilks, remember when you accidentally broadcast that Galactic Top 40 playlist into everyone's brains during meditation class? That was an embarrassing malfunction of my psychic regulators, Xrilks muttered, their antenna drooping slightly. Exactly. A malfunction that got through every psychic dampener in the building because it wasn't trying to get through. It was just noise that happened to be on the right frequency. Liam looked at his assembled team of increasingly bewildered aliens. So here's the plan. Blob's going to act as our connection to the environmental systems, but instead of trying to control them, they're just going to exist as a really weird pathway. Kazut is going to resonate with the quantum shielding at exactly the wrong frequency, not to break it, just to make it hiccup. And Xrilks. Yes? All 12 eyes blinked nervously. You're going to give the security system the equivalent of a psychic earworm. Just think about that really annoying commercial jingle for Zorblax's Quantum Crunch cereal. You know, the one that got banned in 3 sectors for causing spontaneous mental breakdowns. The room had gone quiet, except for the increasingly urgent warnings from the AI about environmental system failure. Every alien was staring at Liam's cobbled-together device with expressions ranging from horror to fascination to whatever emotion Blob was conveying through their increasingly pretzel-like shape. This, announced the mechanoid, is quite possibly the most illogical, unscientific, and thoroughly human approach to problem-solving I have ever witnessed. Professor Zixal's tentacles were now twisted in what might have been deep thought or possibly just confusion. It completely ignores every principle of quantum engineering, security protocols, and basic common sense. Liam agreed cheerfully, making one final adjustment with his student ID card. Want to bet it works? As it turned out, convincing a bunch of highly evolved species to deliberately fail at using their abilities was harder than Liam expected. It was like trying to teach a room full of perfectionists to draw badly on purpose. No, you're resonating too perfectly, Liam said, watching the crystalline entity vibrate with mathematical precision. We need more of a, you know when you accidentally played that human rock music in class and started growing crystals in random directions? That kind of resonance? Kazit's structure flickered with embarrassment. That was a momentary loss of compositional control. You want me to deliberately destabilize my harmonic matrix? Exactly. Think less quantum physics thesis and more teenage garage band. Meanwhile, Blob was having an existential crisis trying to be bad at interfacing with technology. Their translator was spitting out what sounded like error messages in 17 different languages. Just try to think of yourself as a really bad conductor, Liam suggested, like copper wire that's having a bad day. The room's AI chimed in helpfully. Environmental systems at 31% capacity. Might I suggest using your remaining time to update your species extinction insurance policies? Professor Zexel had moved from anxiety purple to a new color that Liam's human eyes couldn't quite process. Perhaps we should reconsider the quantum tunneling. Everyone ready? Liam interrupted, holding up his contraption of jury-rigged quantum components and what might have been a piece of gum wrapper. Xrilks, hit it with that jingle. Zrilks's antenna began to glow as they reluctantly focused on the band's cereal commercial. Almost immediately, every psychic-sensitive being in the room cringed as the first notes of Zorblax's Quantum Crunch, It's Time for Cosmic Lunch, began leaking through the psychic dampeners. Because it started vibrating at what could only be described as the frequency of pure awkwardness, their usually perfect crystalline structure developing weird little offshoots that looked suspiciously like jazz hands. The quantum shielding rippled visibly, like reality itself was cringing. Blob, trying their best to be the worst possible technological interface, had twisted themselves into something that looked like a DNA helix, having a midlife crisis. Random bits of data were leaking through their pseudopods, including what appeared to be cat videos from Earth's ancient internet. The mechanoid's optical sensors were practically strobing with distress. This is completely against all established protocols. The quantum harmonics are totally misaligned. The psychic frequencies are... System error, the AI announced suddenly, its voice modulating between octaves. Unexpected data patterns detected, attempting to compensate. Also, I suddenly have an inexplicable craving for Zorblax's Quantum Crunch cereal. That's when the first unexpected complication hit. The environmental systems, confused by Blob's chaotic data stream, began cycling through random settings. The Paraxian's chamber suddenly filled with water, while the aquatic Neptunian's tank went completely dry. The Jovian student started to expand uncontrollably in the suddenly pressurized atmosphere. "Quick!" Liam shouted over the chaos. "Resuct! Can you use your space folding to keep the Jovian contained? Not perfectly, just sort of scrunch up the space around them." Resuct's appendages twisted in confusion. "Imprecise space manipulation goes against everything I've been taught." "That's why it'll work, and Quantum Shade, we need you to be really bad at shadow walking. Just sort of wobble between dimensions near the Neptunian's tank. Create some quantum uncertainty about whether the water is there or not." The Quantum Shade rippled indignantly. "I have spent centuries perfecting my trans-dimensional precision. And now you get to spend 5 minutes completely winging it." The security system was starting to show signs of confusion. Lights flickered in patterns that suggested either an imminent breakthrough or the beginning of a truly spectacular system crash. The quantum shielding was developing weird little hiccups like reality had the hiccups. "Processing error," the AI announced. "Unexpected resonance patterns detected. Quantum stability at 67% and declining. Also, did you know that Zorblax's Quantum Crunch is now available in dark matter flavor?" The mechanoid, whose logical circuits appeared to be having a breakdown, finally snapped. "This is impossible. You can't solve a quantum security crisis with whatever this is." "Watch me," Liam grinned, even as his pod's temperature swung wildly between absolute zero and plasma state. "Everyone, whatever you're doing, do it worse." The room descended into beautiful chaos. Xrilux's serial jingle had somehow merged with an ancient Earth pop song, creating a psychic mashup that had the quantum computers processing an interpretive dance. Kazut's random crystal growths were now forming shapes that looked suspiciously like abstract art. Blob had achieved a state of such perfect technological incompetence that they were temporarily broadcasting their connection as interpretive modern dance. "Critical system confusion," the AI announced, its voice now somehow simultaneously monotone and singing. "Quantum protocols experiencing unexpected creativity. Security systems are. What is the meaning of existence?" The quantum shielding began to flicker, not from any direct assault but from sheer confusion about what it was supposed to be shielding against. It was like watching the most sophisticated technology in the galaxy have an existential crisis. Professor Zyxal's tentacles were now tied in what appeared to be a new mathematical proof of chaos theory. "I don't believe it," they whispered. "It's actually working." That's when the second complication hit hard. The second complication turned out to be the quantum security system's last-ditch attempt at self-preservation. As the AI struggled with its newfound existential crisis, it decided to do what any panicking computer would do: Try to reboot everything at once. Initiating emergency quantum reset, the AI announced, its voice now somehow perfectly harmonizing with the still-playing serial jingle. Also, has anyone ever really thought about why we call it a quantum reset? Is anything ever truly reset in a quantum universe? Everyone, hold on to your quantum states, Liam shouted, grabbing his makeshift device as reality began to hiccup around them. Skrillex, pump up that psychic volume. Kazut, give me the worst crystal resonance you've got. Blob, just keep being magnificently terrible at your job. The room erupted into a cascade of quantum chaos. The quantum shade, now fully embracing their role in the madness, was shadow-walking so badly they looked like a strobe light having a seizure. Rzik's space folding had become more like space origami gone wrong, creating pockets of reality that looked like they'd been designed by an abstract expressionist. The mechanoid, whose logic circuits had finally given up trying to make sense of anything, started spouting random mathematical theorems in what sounded suspiciously like interpretive poetry. The quantum flux divided by the probability matrix equals, oh my stars, does anything really equal anything else? Professor Zixel's tentacles were now conducting an invisible orchestra of chaos, their color shifting through shades that shouldn't exist in this dimension. The security protocols are cascading. It's either going to work or tear a hole in space-time. Same thing, Liam yelled back as his device began to spark with colors that human eyes weren't meant to process. Everyone on my mark, do the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. The Paraxian breathed ice instead of fire. The Jovian student condensed when they should have expanded. Grilk's broadcast feelings of profound confusion about breakfast cereals directly into the quantum mainframe. Kazut's crystals grew in patterns that made geometry itself uncomfortable. With a sound like reality throwing up its hands in defeat, the quantum shielding suddenly collapsed. The security doors, faced with multiple violations of the laws of physics, decided to opt out of existence entirely. The AI, now thoroughly confused about its purpose in life, made one final announcement. Security protocols have achieved quantum enlightenment. All systems returning to whatever, man. Does anyone else feel like everything is just like connected? The environmental systems reset themselves with a wheeze, stabilizing just before anyone could be freeze-dried, dissolved, or accidentally evolved into a higher form of life. The examination hall doors swung open with what sounded like an embarrassed creak. For a moment, everyone just stood, or floated, or vibrated, or existed in multiple quantum states, in stunned silence. The mechanoid's optical sensors had dimmed to emergency power, apparently trying to reboot their entire belief system. Professor Zixel was the first to speak, their tentacles slowly unknotting themselves. In all my cycles of teaching, I have never seen such a complete violation of every known law of physics, the quantum shade suggested. Triumph of chaos over order, Kazut chimed in, their crystal structure still forming small question marks. Beautiful disaster, offered Blob's translator before shorting out and playing what sounded like ancient Earth elevator music. Effective solution, Professor Zixel finished, their color settling into something between amazement and amusement. Completely unorthodox, probably impossible, and definitely not going in any textbook, but effective. Liam grinned, holding up his now slightly melted contraption. Sometimes the best solution isn't about having the most advanced technology or the most sophisticated abilities. Sometimes you just need to be really, really good at making things go wrong in exactly the right way. The AI, still apparently contemplating the deeper meaning of existence, made one final comment. Quantum security protocols reset complete. Exam postponed due to unexpected enlightenment. Also, does anyone else feel like Zorblax's Quantum Crunch cereal might be a metaphor for the interconnectedness of all things? A week after the Quantum Security Enlightenment incident, as it was now officially listed in the Academy's records, things had changed in surprisingly pleasant ways. The examination hall had been repaired, though the AI occasionally still hummed serial jingles when it thought no one was listening. The biggest change was in how Liam's fellow students viewed human problem-solving. The mechanoid had actually started a study group focused on innovative illogical solutions, though they insisted it was purely for academic research into primitive methodologies. Their optical sensors still glitched whenever Liam solved equations by doodling in the margins. Ex-relics had taken to broadcasting their thoughts through interpretive psychic static, when stuck on particularly difficult problems, claiming it helped them think outside the quantum box. Their 12 eyes now occasionally went cross-dimensional on purpose just to see if looking at problems from literally impossible angles helped. Even Blob had embraced their newfound talent for technical incompetence, becoming the Academy's go-to expert for dealing with overly rigid computer systems. Their new official title was Quantum Uncertainty Interface Specialist, though their translator still occasionally glitched and introduced them as Professional Chaos Noodle. During the rescheduled exam, Professor Zixal had added a new question worth extra credit. Explain how deliberately incorrect application of advanced principles might yield unexpected solutions. Please refrain from actually demonstrating this during the exam. The Quantum Shade had started offering meditation classes in controlled imperfection, though most students were still too afraid to attend after someone accidentally achieved enlightenment and briefly existed in 17 dimensions at once. Liam's jury-rigged device had been enshrined in the Academy's Museum of Scientific Achievements, labeled Human Innovation Type 2B, Successful Failure. The curator had tried to analyze how it worked, but the device had responded by playing cat videos and demanding snacks. As Liam sat in the cafeteria, watching Kuzet attempt to deliberately grow their crystals in imperfect patterns, while the Jovian student practiced controlled partial phase shifts, he couldn't help but smile. The mechanoid floated over, their optical sensors whirring in what had become their version of friendly curiosity. I still don't understand, they said, settling at the table. How did you know it would work? That's the best part, Liam replied, sipping his coffee, which the replicator now served at completely random temperatures, claiming it enhanced the experience. I didn't. Sometimes not knowing something won't work is the only reason it does. From somewhere in the ceiling, the AI's voice drifted down. Weekly lunch menu updated. Today's special, Quantum Uncertainty Soup, may or may not contain actual particles. Also, has anyone else noticed how fascinating spoons are? The Academy would never be quite the same again, but then again, as humans had known for centuries, normal was vastly overrated.